Hello, all. Welcome to week 10. So, this week we're going to skip ahead quite a lot. 2 weeks ago, we were reading the end of the story of Adam and Eve with Cain and Abel. Last week, we skipped ahead from them, skipped right past Noah and the flood to Noah's descendant Abram, who was later called Abraham. Now, Abraham had a son named Isaac in fulfillment of God's promise to him that he would have a son. And Isaac had a son named Jacob, who also had another name. He was also called Israel. And Israel, Jacob, had 12 sons, and all of them, together with their families, after a variety of hijinks and adventures, ended up living in Egypt instead of in Canaan or Palestine or Israel. There was a famine at the time, and Egypt had food, so that's why they were there. One of Jacob, or Israel's sons, named Joseph, had a high office in Egypt. And I should be clear, by that I mean not that he had a corner office in a skyscraper, but he was a important and powerful official, just to be clear. Now, the first book of the Bible, which is Genesis, which we've been reading from, ended with all of them arriving and settling in Egypt. So this week, we're going to pick up the story about, we're skipping ahead to 400 years later with the beginning of the book called Exodus. Now, there's a spoiler built into that title because Exodus means the road out. Ex, out, odos, road. Exodus, the road out. So, what that means is Abraham's family is not going to stay in Egypt. So let's see what happens. Exodus chapter 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob, who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So that's 11. The total number of people born to Jacob was 70. Now Joseph, there's 12, was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and that whole generation. But the Israelites were fruitful and prolific, which means they had a lot of children. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them. Or they will increase, and in the event of war they will join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They made them slaves. Abraham's descendants built supply cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites, the descendants of Israel or Jacob, who was Abraham's grandson. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites, and they made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, those are great names, "When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool," so when they're having the babies, "if you see that it is a boy baby, kill him. But if it is a girl, she shall live." But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this and allowed the boys to live?" And the midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and they give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, "Every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every girl live." So, what we see here is actually exactly the fulfillment of what God told Abraham was going to happen last week. You remember, he made a covenant with Abraham and promised him that he would have children, that his children would become very numerous, and that they would inherit the land that Abram was living in as a stranger, as a foreigner. But he said, before all this happens, your descendants are going to be slaves for 400 years. So we see here the rest of the story that continues and explains how it came to be, what God had already told Abram would happen. Next, we see that things start to go badly with the Egyptians, and the Israelites are in a very, very bad spot. They're being mistreated. Well, they're slaves. Being a slave is always a bad thing. And then we see the Pharaoh trying to limit how large the Israelite people grow. He commands that if any boy baby is born, he's to be killed. So all the boy babies are to be killed, and he figures that will stop them from growing so numerous. They can have some women for a while, and then once things slow down, then we can let the boy babies live again, and we maintain our slave labor force in a reasonable and controllable number. Evil, but effective, or it would have been. He tried to put this job off on the Hebrew midwives, the women who went and helped the mothers give birth. He told them to kill the boy babies. But the midwives, they made up a little bit of a story. It probably was true, but maybe not all the time. But they said, it's not our fault. The Hebrew women, they get the job done quickly. By the time we get there, usually the baby's already born. And what do you want us to do? Kill a baby when he's, already nursing and the mother's got him in her arms. That's not our job. So the Pharaoh says, fine. And he tells his own people, his soldiers, to go and take the boy babies away and kill them by throwing them in the Nile. So, what do we learn from this? Pharaoh is evil, not a good guy. He is our bad guy in this story. 2, these midwives are faithful. They fear God, and they don't have a guarantee that the Pharaoh will just let them live, but they still do the right thing. They refuse to kill babies. We could say that's a low bar, but they refuse to kill babies. So, we're going to see what happens next. I'm guessing most of you know where this story is going. So for now, we'll wrap up. God bless you all. I'll see you on day 2, usually Wednesday.